The United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, has been one of the most powerful tools of American diplomacy, not through coercion or force, but through partnership, investment, and a commitment to humanitarian principles. Through health programs, democratic institution building, and disaster relief, USAID has strengthened fragile societies while simultaneously reinforcing America's role as a leader on the global stage. Its success has been rooted in the mutually reinforcing relationships it has built between aid recipients, local governments, and international partners. These structures create long-term stability, demonstrating that foreign assistance is not just about charity, it is about cultivating self-sustaining systems that support both human welfare and geopolitical security. Yet today, USAID faces an existential threat. In a series of unprecedented moves, the Trump administration has initiated the rapid dismantling of the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, an action that deviates sharply from traditional budgetary processes. This aggressive overhaul, led by President Donald Trump in collaboration with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and advisor Elon Musk, has resulted in the abrupt termination of critical foreign aid programs and the dismissal of thousands of dedicated professionals. The administration's justification centers on allegations of massive fraud and corruption within USAID, claims that have been widely disputed and lack substantial evidence. This essay examines the far-reaching consequences of this dismantling, focusing on its impact on global health initiatives, democratic resilience, and disaster recovery efforts. The administration's actions began with an executive order imposing a 90-day freeze on all foreign aid, effectively halting USAID's operations worldwide. This was swiftly followed by mass layoffs, reducing the agency's workforce from over 10,000 employees to fewer than 300. These decisions were made unilaterally, bypassing the customary legislative oversight and disregarding the agency's congressionally mandated mission. The sudden cessation of funding has led to the suspension of numerous humanitarian programs, leaving vulnerable populations without essential support and creating a vacuum that adversarial nations are eager to fill. The consequences will not be limited to those who directly depend on these programs. They will reverberate across international alliances, economic partnerships, and even US national security interests. By examining the fate of three key USAID initiatives, the fight against HIV/AIDS in Africa, democracy building in Ukraine, and disaster relief in Haiti, we can understand both the power of these programs when they are allowed to function and the cascading consequences when they are stripped away. For more than 20 years, the US has been at the forefront of the battle against HIV/AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa. In 2003, the US launched the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, a groundbreaking initiative that changed the trajectory of the epidemic. Through a combination of direct medical aid, infrastructure development, and local partnerships, the program made life-saving antiretroviral treatment widely accessible. The results were staggering. Over 25 million lives were saved, transmission rates plummeted, and entire healthcare systems were transformed. This success did not occur in isolation. It was the result of a deeply interconnected system in which US funding allowed African healthcare networks to expand and improve, creating a long-term foundation for public health. In turn, this investment strengthened diplomatic ties between the US and African nations, reinforcing America's reputation as a global leader in humanitarian aid. PEPFAR was not simply a handout, it was a force multiplier, demonstrating how sustained engagement can build resilient societies that require less external intervention over time. But today, that foundation is crumbling. Recent budget cuts have placed PEPFAR in jeopardy, forcing clinics to shut down, disrupting medication supplies, and leaving millions at risk of losing access to treatment. Without continued investment, the decades of progress made in controlling HIV and AIDS will rapidly unravel. The results will be devastating. An unchecked resurgence of the virus, collapsing healthcare systems, and a humanitarian crisis that will spill across borders. Beyond the immediate health impact, the collapse of PEPFAR weakens US influence in the region. African governments that once saw the US as a steadfast partner now question its reliability. Meanwhile, geopolitical rivals such as China and Russia are eager to fill the void, expanding their own influence in Africa through infrastructure projects and economic partnerships. What was once a model of American soft power is now becoming a cautionary tale of abandonment, sending a dangerous message that US commitments are no longer dependable. Since Russia's 2014 invasion of Crimea, Ukraine has been fighting not just a military battle, but an existential struggle for democratic survival. In this fight, USAID has been one of its most important allies. Through funding for anti-corruption reforms, independent journalism, and economic development, the agency has played a key role in strengthening Ukraine's institutions against both internal and external threats. The significance of this support cannot be overstated. By helping Ukraine build transparent governance structures and a resilient media landscape, USAID ensured that the country could resist Russian influence not just through military means, but by strengthening the very fabric of its society. This created a powerful self-reinforcing system. US support enabled Ukraine's institutions to grow stronger, which in turn solidified its alignment with Western democratic values and its deepening ties with NATO and the EU. However, with USAID funding now being slashed, this system is collapsing at the worst possible moment. Programs designed to combat Russian disinformation are shutting down. Independent news outlets, once fortified against cyber attacks and propaganda campaigns, are struggling to survive. Civil society organizations that once acted as watchdogs for corruption are now underfunded and vulnerable. Without these stabilizing forces, Ukraine's ability to sustain its democratic progress is significantly weakened. The geopolitical consequences are immediate and severe. Every step back for Ukraine is a step forward for Russian influence. A weakened civil society makes it easier for authoritarian forces to spread misinformation, destabilize democratic processes, and undermine Ukraine's Western alliances. Moreover, the withdrawal of US support sends a chilling message to other nations on the front lines of democratic struggles. The United States cannot be relied upon in moments of crisis. If Ukraine, a country fighting on the front lines of the global struggle between democracy and authoritarianism, can be abandoned, who is next? USAID has long been a lifeline for Haiti, particularly in the aftermath of natural disasters. The 2010 earthquake, which killed hundreds of thousands and displaced over 1 million people, was a defining moment in US-Haitian relations. In the years that followed, USAID poured resources into Haiti, not just in the form of immediate relief, but through investments in infrastructure, healthcare, and economic development. The goal was not merely to provide short-term aid, but to help Haiti build a more resilient society that could withstand future crises. For years, this strategy worked. USAID projects rebuilt hospitals and schools, trained medical professionals, and supported small businesses to stimulate economic growth. Over time, Haiti's ability to recover from disasters improved, reducing its dependence on external assistance. Once again, the triadic effect was clear. USAID's funding strengthened Haiti's local institutions, which in turn stabilized the region and reinforced America's global reputation as a leader in humanitarian response. But now, that system is being dismantled. The abrupt suspension of USAID programs in Haiti has left critical infrastructure unfinished, essential medical services underfunded, and economic initiatives in limbo. The result is a downward spiral. As institutions weaken, instability grows, leading to increased violence, economic collapse, and mass migration. This is not just a crisis for Haiti, it is a crisis for the United States. The erosion of stability in Haiti has direct consequences for US border security and regional policy. Increased migration pressure, rising crime, and political upheaval create a chain reaction that affects the entire Western Hemisphere. And just as in Africa and Ukraine, the US retreat creates a vacuum that hostile actors are all too eager to exploit. USAID has never been about charity. It has been about building systems that benefit both the aid recipients and the United States. It's about fostering resilience so that regions do not descend into chaos, and about proving that American leadership is defined not just by military strength, but by the willingness to invest in human security. By dismantling USAID, the US is not just turning its back on millions of vulnerable people, it is actively weakening its own geopolitical position, eroding its credibility, and surrendering influence to authoritarian competitors. If America continues down this path, the consequences will be far-reaching and irreversible. The resurgence of preventable diseases, the destabilization of strategic allies, and the worsening of humanitarian crises will not just hurt the world, they will hurt America. But the destruction of USAID is not merely a withdrawal from global responsibility, nor is it just an example of short-sighted isolationism masquerading as an America-first agenda. The motivations run deeper and are more insidious. The elimination of foreign aid is not about budget cuts, nor is it about rooting out inefficiency. It is about eliminating points of comparison. The success of USAID in improving lives abroad, through public healthcare, democratic institution building, and disaster recovery, has long stood as evidence that societies can be organized around something other than extreme wealth stratification and corporate control. That evidence is dangerous to an oligarchy that thrives on keeping inequality unchallenged. By dismantling programs that provide free HIV treatment in Africa, the administration is not only condemning millions to unnecessary suffering, but also ensuring that Americans do not look at the availability of free life-saving medicine elsewhere and start asking why their own healthcare is a privilege rather than a right. By cutting aid to Ukraine, they are not just weakening an ally in its fight against authoritarianism, they are also sending a message that democracy itself is negotiable, an inconvenient barrier to those who would prefer to rule unchallenged. By pulling out of Haiti, they are not just abandoning a nation in crisis. They are ensuring that the destabilization creates a cycle of poverty and migration that can then be used to stoke domestic xenophobia, keeping the working class divided and distracted from the real forces driving their economic struggles. This is not incompetence, nor is it merely cruelty for cruelty's sake. It is a strategy. A world where USAID is allowed to succeed is a world where people see that investment in public welfare leads to stability, that strong institutions protect against corruption, that disaster relief is not an act of charity, but a moral and strategic imperative. And if that is true abroad, it is also true at home. The oligarchy that gutted USAID does not fear international stability or humanitarian progress. It fears the expectations those things create. The great lie of America First is that it suggests there is a competition between helping people abroad and helping people at home. In reality, the same forces dismantling USAID are also dismantling public services, education, healthcare, and labor protections in the United States. The beneficiaries of this destruction are not ordinary Americans, who will suffer just as surely from rising global instability as they do from the erosion of their own social safety nets. The beneficiaries are the ultra-wealthy and the political elite who depend on division, inequality, and despair to maintain their grip on power. If America continues down this path, it will not simply lose its global standing, it will lose its very soul. The destruction of USAID is not just a policy decision, it is an attack on the fundamental idea that society can and should work for the common good. And if we allow that attack to succeed abroad, we should not be surprised when we wake up to find that the same forces have ensured there is no aid left for us at home either.